This is Podcast Theory.
Hello again, fellow podcaster, and welcome back to Podcast Theory. I'm your host, Jason Sircone, and in today's episode, it's time for a reality check. Now, if you've been listening or watching or reading or pretty much been in my orbit over the past few months, you know that the statistic that I have grabbed hold of in the podcasting space is as follows. 90% of new podcasters don't get beyond 3 episodes. 3 episodes. I've talked about this on my video series that you can grab at bombtrackmedia.com/free. But I wanted to zero in on this because it really does blow my mind. And it's only because planning out your podcast isn't just about doing one episode and throwing it out there and seeing what happens, seeing if it gets legs out of the gates, because I'm going to break some very bad news for you. It's not going to. Podcasting is all about the long game. It's about building a reliable, engaging, captivating piece of content that your audience can sink their teeth into. And the more they do, the more they build trust in you. And the more they know they have a show that they can turn to get education, entertainment, answers to their questions, and solutions to their problems. When I hear that statistic, and the first time I heard it, I just shook my head, because I know that in my time in podcasting, especially when I really zeroed into it as a full-time thing over the past few years, I've seen a number of statistics that are very similar to that. And depending on what website you land on or what podcast you listen to or what social media account you follow, at some point along the way, you're probably going to hear something like that 90% 3-episode statistic thrown your way. Now, I've heard that many podcasters don't get past 7 episodes. Only a small percentage, like 5 to 6%, ever break 50. No matter how you chop up the numbers, they're not pretty. And one of the big reasons why I built the model behind Bombtrack Media in regards to production was to try to eradicate some of that pod fade. And when I really started thinking about that 90% 3-episode drop-off rate, it inspired me to do this episode today, because I have the easiest freaking solution imaginable for overcoming that drop-off. Do more than 3 episodes before you make your podcast live. I'm going to take that a step further and say, do more than 1, because I have to believe when I hear that number, the reason why it's as low as it is because new podcasters, businesses that are leaning into this, they want to get podcasting into their repertoire. They want to use it to promote their business, to raise awareness, to generate leads. You can assign whatever label or whatever goal, expectation, you name it, to your podcast. But if you're only putting 1 episode out there, in no way, shape, or form is that going to return to you the information you need on whether you need to keep moving forward. When you start a new podcast, whether you have an audience already developed through email, through social media, it's still a new entity within your organization's approach. It's going to take time for the podcast listeners to show up and pay attention to what you have to say. Even if people in your built-in audience are podcast listeners, maybe they're not tuning in right away. Maybe many of the people in your existing audience simply don't listen to podcasts. And this will go back to the repurposing side of things. Just because they don't listen to podcasts doesn't mean that your information is not valuable. So you'll want to repurpose that content and present it to them in a way that they can consume it and they can be impacted by it. But I have to believe when I hear that statistic, what a lot of companies are doing, and a lot of aspiring podcasters on the hobbyist side as well, is they're producing one episode and then they're publishing it. And when they publish it, more than likely, they're not seeing the return that they had built up in their mind because they thought once they put a podcast out there that the world was going to change. I got news for you. It's not going to change, especially on day one. A lot of people are releasing podcasts today. By the time I finish this sentence, another podcast will have gone live. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever, but you have to be strategic in how you bring this content to the world. And if you're only producing one episode and then putting it out into the world to see what happens, you are setting yourself up for failure. Period. End of sentence. One episode is not going to do what you need it to do or what you expect it to do. You can't just dip your toe with one episode and see what happens. And if I get great listenership, I'll do episode 2. No, you have to be prepared for the long-term gains a podcast can bring you. And in order to do that, you need to be preparing well more than one episode, far more than 3 episodes before you ever bring your podcast to life. I've talked about this on past episodes. I've talked about this in a number of different guest appearances I've made. Your podcast launch is a big deal, and it should be treated as such. If you give your audience 5 episodes that they can sink their teeth into, and it truly sets the table for what your podcast is going to be all about, that's going to put you in possession. That's going to put you in position to get far better feedback, far better reviews, far more numerous reviews, and ultimately let you know if you're off to a good start, because one episode may not be enough to let your audience get truly bought in. It's just it's simply a lack of content. They may need to hear more from you. And even doing 5 episodes in your launch is not necessarily going to tell the story. I believe in doing at least 5 episodes in your podcast launch as a baseline release, because again, you're giving your audience a number of episodes to get to know your show, to understand what you want to convey to them with your podcast. And at the same time, you are getting more comfortable on the microphone and you're finding your style. You're finding your voice. You're getting yourself in a position to be that more impactful host. If you try to shotgun content just to see what happens and one episode doesn't do what you thought it might, you're going to get discouraged and you're ultimately going to fall flat. And when I hear 3 episodes, 90% of podcasters not getting beyond that, this is why I feel that number exists. You have to be incredibly strategic with how you bring content to the world, because you know as well as I do, it is a noisy internet digital environment out there right now. There are a lot of people that are leveraging the World Wide Web to get their message across. And that could be through a number of different mediums. But you have to cut through that noise, and you have to do so by being an asset that is consistently showing up for your audience. Starting with 5 episodes is a phenomenal way to give a nice block of content to your audience to really sink their teeth into, get to know what you're all about. Now, you know me at Bombtrack Media, I'm all about seasons. And your season could be 5 episodes, maybe it's 6, 7, 8, and you can release it all at once, just like Netflix does, just like Hulu does. Give them everything they want right out of the gates, no waiting. Let them see what the show is all about. Now, whether you change that up for season 2, that's another story. We got to get past that initial hurdle. When you get to season 2, you can evaluate how dropping all the episodes at once went. But I'm a firm believer in giving my audience everything they need with no hesitation, no delay. Let them binge, let them listen how they want. They can jump around throughout the season. They can listen to their favorite episode first, whatever subject line grabs their attention. Seasons are an incredibly impactful way to get your podcast off the ground, because not only do you bring that nice block of content to your audience, but you also save yourself time, you reduce stress, and you're making positive strides towards eradicating pod fade. Forget 3 episodes. If you launch 8 in your first season, you're already past that horrible statistic. It can help drive these numbers in a more positive direction. But if you are planning on going weekly with your podcast, you should not be going live with your content until you have a minimum of 12 to 15 episodes recorded. If you have that many in the bank, you will absolutely blow that 3 episode 90% statistic out of the freaking water. And you're going to put yourself in a much better position to succeed, because you can do a powerful launch, start with 5 episodes, then you'll still have 7 to 10 episodes in the bank. That's 2.5 months of content that you'll have to fall back on. That's going to give you time to prepare and get ready for the next block of content that you want to put out there. You want to always put yourself in a position to succeed. And just doing 1 episode and floating it out to see what happens is not doing that. I mentioned how much that 3 episode 90% failure statistic blows my mind. This is why, because this is not complicated. If you're going to bring a podcast to life, you should have a clear understanding of why you're bringing that podcast to life, what you want it to accomplish, who you want it to serve, and how you're going to produce it in a way that's manageable and allows you to stay consistent for your audience. If you're not doing it that way, it's guaranteed that time will catch up with you and you're going to start to feel burnout. You're going to start to feel like this is too much work for not enough return, especially if you only do 1 or 2 episodes at a time. You know as well as I do, life can happen. When life happens, podcasting can slide down the priority list. Life could be personal, life could be professional, life could be a combination of both. But other priorities take precedence, and then the podcast all of a sudden, it's moving down the list. I'm not going to get to an episode this week. I'll do one next week. And then maybe next week something else comes up. Now all of a sudden you're a few weeks since you've put a new episode out there, and your audience starts wondering where the hell you've been. Where the hell did you go? Once you lose their trust and they find another podcast to listen to, good luck getting back in their rotation. Consistency is a big part of this, but it has to be consistency for the right reasons. It doesn't just mean that you're showing up every week because that's what every other guru in the world has said you have to do. To me, consistency is all in the communication that you bring to your audience, and you let them know how you're going to be delivering content to them. If it's in season format, if it's in weekly format, whatever the case may be, your audience needs to be informed on when you're going to be there for them. So if you are planning on taking a break between new episodes, all you need to do is communicate that. Come to your audience and say, I hope you've been enjoying our content so far. We're going to take a quick break, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever the case may be, to recharge and build more content to deliver to you so you can continue to be impacted by our message. While we're gone, we invite you to check out some of the episodes that you may have missed. This is a great time to jump back in the archives and catch up on some of those episodes that you haven't had an opportunity to take in yet. That's it. Instead of pod fading and going away and not letting your audience know what's in store, simply set the table in that capacity. We've got to get beyond this 3 episode 90% failure statistic in our space. And if you truly want podcasting to work for you and be a pillar in your brand and marketing efforts and not an anchor, you've got to plot things out strategically. So I will say, if you are not identifying your why, if you're not considering how much time you have to dedicate, and you're not figuring out the best way to proceed before you ever press record, before you ever even purchase a microphone, you're doing it the wrong way. And I would love to talk with you in more detail to show you a better roadmap that's going to get you from point A to point B in a much more efficient manner. You have to get beyond 3 episodes in your initial production, or else you may fall prey to that ugly statistic. 12 to 15 episodes, that should be your benchmark. Plot out what you want to talk about. Take time to record that content, build it in a way that does fit your schedule, whether you're doing those episodes solo, whether you're bringing guests onto your show, whether you're having panel discussions, however you want to structure those first episodes, have them in the bank so you don't run into an issue that will lead to pod fade. I'll tell you a quick story. I had a gentleman who had connected with me. We were talking about potential clients for each other that we could share referrals and help one another build our businesses. I was telling him about my program, and he said, man, I think I've got a perfect candidate for your program. I said, that's excellent. Let's do a connection. I'd love to talk with him. So he reached out to his client, and then he got back to me and said, well, he's thinking about it. I'll let you know where this goes. I said, okay, great. I ended up following up with him a few weeks later because I had not heard anything. And I asked, what's going on with the client you thought would work for my program? Are we going to do a connection or what? And his response was the response that I feel is the ultimate nail in the coffin for anybody that wants to bring podcasting into their world. He said, well, he just thinks he's going to figure it out as he goes. He's just going to try this out and see how it goes. He's going to figure it out as they proceed. And I said to my friend, I guarantee he's dead within 3 episodes. I was wrong. He was dead within 2. Thus, that ugly statistic that I've been referencing throughout this podcast and throughout this live stream. If you're not setting yourself up to succeed, you're not going to. There is no magic solution, and trying to figure it out as you go is like getting on a chessboard for the very first time, playing the world's greatest chess master. He's going to destroy you because you have no idea what you're doing. With podcasting, there's a lot of moving parts, and you have to understand how those parts operate in synergy with one another if you truly want to make this all come together. It may seem simple on the surface of just turn on a microphone, share your thoughts, have a conversation, turn off the microphone, turn off the camera, edit and produce and publish. That's the surface level, just the basics type of information that you need to know. I'm all about strategy. I'm all about planning. And the reason why is because if you don't do that, you don't set yourself up to succeed. So if getting beyond this ugly statistic is something that you want to do, or maybe you've heard a variation of that 90% 3 episode statistic and it scares you a little bit, makes you wonder if you can truly make this work, we need to have a conversation because I want to show you why you can make it work. And I want to reveal to you the reasons why that statistic does not need to be how it goes for you. You do not need to fall into that trap. You and your brand can be on the right side of these statistics if you plan appropriately and you don't fire off the very first episode you record before you're ready to bring more content to the world. So connect with me. I'd love to have a conversation. This is free. This is not something I'm charging for. If you feel like what I have to offer can help you do this the right way, I am more than happy to determine whether a good working relationship with you and I can be found. But overall, if you are looking to get into podcasting, I've taken it upon myself to make this my mission. I want more podcasters that are using this approach and this initiative for their business to succeed and not get too overwhelmed with all of those working and moving pieces that I told you about a moment ago. Start planning properly. Do not release your podcast with just 1 episode. get 12 to 15 in the bank, make your podcast release a big deal, and ultimately put yourself in a position to win at this. I want to see you hit 100 episodes, 200 episodes, 500 episodes. That's all realistic if you do this right. That is going to conclude this episode of Pod Theory. I hope you had a great time, because I know I did. I look forward to connecting with you again on the next episode, where I'll be sharing more tips, strategies, and insights regarding the podcast platform. Until our paths cross again on that episode, I invite you to jump back in the archives of Podcast Theory and check out what you've missed. Let me know by reaching out at jason@bombtrackmedia.com what you think of the show. And I look forward to bringing more great podcast insight your way on the very next episode. Until then, this is Jason Sircone on Podcast Theory signing off. Good talk. I'll see you out there.